Hope everybody's doing well on this particular Monday afternoon, Memorial Day, and all along those lines. It's actually been a very busy day here in Durham, North Carolina, and all along those lines, even though we did have some rain outside earlier, and it looks like it has cleared out, but who knows, there might be some more coming later on as well. Haven't heard as many of the birds chirping, and actually a good friend of mine, Daryl Stover, will be doing a birding event at the Hayti Heritage Center, another place that I work at, on this coming Saturday, I believe it is. So he'll be doing that particular event over the weekend and all along those lines. And I know he's already planned to go and see some places where some robins are and some mockingbirds and sparrows and other birds that are native to this particular area and all along those lines. But here in North Carolina, we are known as the City of Medicine. That is one of the monikers that we have, and all along those lines. And of course, it's also known for its sports, having Duke University here that has definitely had some success in terms of basketball, and UNC just down the road. They've also had limited success in football, even though they've definitely had some players that have done well and all along those lines. And in some other sports, such as soccer, they've done quite well at. Mia Hamm being from UNC, and they've also done well in baseball. As a matter of fact, they just had UNC win the baseball championship, the ACC championship, and they'll be doing the regionals later on. Not that much success in hockey because right now we're down 0-3, and it looks like the Florida Panthers will be possibly completing a sweep on this particular evening and all along those lines, and then they will play the winner of the Edmonton match, and I'm trying to remember who Edmonton. Oh, Edmonton is playing Dallas. So between the winners of the Oilers and Dallas, they will play. But it's a good chance, because these games have not been close, that the Hurricanes will be swept once again, because I think they made it to the championship under Rod Brind'Amour, and they've been swept each time, and there's a good chance that they'll be swept again this time. So maybe they'll surprise me and win a game, winning this afternoon. But we'll see how that all plays out. I know a lot of folks are thinking that in basketball, the Knicks were going to go down 3-0, but they actually managed to put a strong comeback in the second half, won that game, and now they're only down 2-1. So maybe they're going to even up their series and all along those lines. And folks are following them just like they're following the Oklahoma Thunder and who they are going up against as well, which is the Minnesota Timberwolves. So we're down to the finals in a lot of these sports. And I think that Indiana also had the Indy 500. And of course, I think we're still in the middle of the various Triple Crowns as well. But I did mention that we are known as the City of Medicine. And my guest today is definitely somebody that knows a little bit about healthcare and all along those lines. That being Jeffrey Charles Hardy, who is a 30-year veteran, international healthcare planning consultant, who has developed hospitals and healthcare systems for Kaiser Foundation International in the Bahamas, Bahrain, and Curacao, as well as the United Arab Republic, among others. So, in his recent past, he helmed the new facility development initiatives for the International Medical Center in Hanoi, Vietnam, the Women's and Children's Hospital in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, the Mobile Public Health Program in Delta State, Nigeria, and the Mota Baba Hospital in Yakwala, Kenya. So he's definitely been doing a lot in that space. And following the release of USA sanctions in 2012, he worked with the Myanmar Ministry of Health, the People's Health Foundation, and the Rakhine Tahai Association to fund, plan, and build the first of 250 prototype community development and health centers in the deep rural village. So definitely have some ideas and thoughts around that. So we're going to hear what his thoughts are around hospital planning and what's going on in that world and all along those lines. So definitely looking forward to bringing in Mr. Hardy and seeing what he's got going on in his world. I know that when I grew up in Warren County, North Carolina, we had HealthCo, which is actually a health center as well. So we had that. It was actually going to be a minority-based city, Soul City, that Floyd McKissick was going to create, and it didn't have that much success in terms of being a created city, even though I think they got some money from Nixon back in the day and everything along those lines. But the Rural Health Center did do quite well. And then also here in Durham, we've got Lincoln Center, which used to be a hospital when we were more segregated and all along those lines, but now it is a health center. And I was actually born when it was a segregated hospital in '62. So I know that some of my friends, including some of my family, have said that granddad on my mother's side wanted to come down and rush down here to see his first grandson and grand kid and all along those lines. And I think they had a total of 11 grandkids. As my mom had three sisters, did have a brother that died in stillbirth at a very young age and everything, but she had sisters, all of whom are around except for one. So three of the four are still around, and I've got 11. Counting myself, there are 11 cousins, but I was the first. So my brother came later, and my cousin Emmett, I think he was the one immediately after me, and everything like that. And that was on Carolyn, the one who passed a son, and then there was definitely others that were in there as well. So it's about 11 of us. One aunt had 6 kids, and the rest of them were keeping in that low number. The mom and dad only had 2. My Aunt Carolyn only had 2, and Aunt Julie, that lives here in Durham, where I live, had only had 1 of her own. She did have some stepkids that she definitely helped in some of their raising as well, but only 1 child of her own. So that was the 11th one, and she's one of the ones that's definitely involved in business and all along those lines. So that's my cousin Tanya, who's now a Yelp advisor and part of the Yelp staff and all along those lines. So just tell me how you got into health, and did you ever think about coming to the City of Medicine? We got all kinds of research facilities. Glaxo Wellcome is here. It used to be just plain Glaxo, but now it's GlaxoSmithKline, and definitely we've got Pfizer, and we've got a number of other health-related facilities here in this area. And like I said, it is known as the City of Medicine because we've got Duke Hospital, Durham Regional, which is a separate hospital, even though I think Duke runs it. And of course, we've got Lincoln, which is, like I said, a community center, even though a community health center, even though it used to be a hospital. And we had Watts Hospital and a number of other hospitals and private doctors and all along those lines. So I'm just wondering your thoughts about how you got involved in the medical profession.
Wow, that was quite an intro. Fascinating. My beginning was over 50 years ago. I am retired. I'm a retired healthcare facility planner. And so I look at everything from a planning perspective, but it began when I was a hospital corpsman in the United States Coast Guard Reserve right during the Vietnam War. And I was taking care of guys coming back from Vietnam and guys who were in the San Francisco Bay who had, broken legs or whatever. But primarily, what I did was take care of these guys and realize that it was such a wonderful experience. I allowed it to take over my life. So from delivering bedpans, that's what I did first, to being a high consultant, probably a senior consultant for Kaiser Foundation International, and then starting my own company, and then giving up on that, even selling my company, and getting into nonprofit and starting a nonprofit organization so that we could help the people all over the world who need it more than the rich people that I had been taking care of for 40 years. So I ended up building a clinic with my board, my Care for Peace board. We are the Care for Peace Foundation, and we built a clinic in Myanmar. And Myanmar is that little country. Let me see. It's right there on the map, right here, if you can see it. Right just to the west of Thailand. It's south of China. It's east of India and Bangladesh. It's quite a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful country, but nobody really knows a whole lot about it. I ended up going and having the time of my life and building a prototype clinic, and for the people who had not much less seen a doctor or a nurse. So that's it. That's my beginning to end process that got me into health and projected me through the health career, and ended up getting to the point where I could help people design and build and operate their own mini health centers.
It sounds really fascinating, Dr. Hardy, and all along those lines and everything. I was just wondering, because today is Memorial Day, your thoughts around Memorial Day, as you just definitely mentioned, you had worked with the military and during the Vietnam, and I'm thinking that you saw a lot of people that unfortunately are not with us, and that is what Memorial Day is about: is honoring those that did not make it out of the war environment. So I just wondering your take on this particular holiday and the meaning of Memorial Day.
Well, my thanks goes out to all the people who are not here. They're the ones who are in Arlington Cemetery and the ones in the cemeteries and in the hearts of millions and millions of people. My father fought in the Pacific during World War II, and I heard the stories of the men who were on the ships that he was uh, sailing on right outside Iwo Jima and that whole Pacific theater. And those men who died. Um, I mean, how can we thank them? And I think that the way we thank them, in my opinion, is we talk about it and we discuss and we thank the people who are the survivors. But I think that the most important thing we can do is make sure that we keep alive what it is those good people died for. And keeping alive is the freedom, the democracy, the attitude of can do that is so American, and the welcoming spirit of America to all people all over the world. And it's not about immigration, it's about respecting people all over the world who know that there's a place called America that is a beautiful place to live. And I just think that that's how we honor the people today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely agree with you on that and everything like that. We have another show, ironically, it's called Naked at Night and everything, but it is Rick Rodner, who used to write for Jimmy Kimmel, and a friend of his who's Lance Richardson, whose dad was a writer and creator of the Pink Panther, and they go back and forth. They have different views. I would say Rick is definitely very liberal, Lance is very conservative, and all along those lines. But they had a special guest from Canada, and one of the things he talked about is how we pay attention to a lot of the wars that are right in our face because the media puts them right in our face, like Ukraine and Russia and what's going on in the Gaza and Israel conflict and everything. But he mentioned a lot, including Myanmar, that we don't discuss enough in our media coverage. I just wanted your thoughts around that because there are a lot of conflicts that are going on, and I know part of your mission is around peace and everything like that. But there are a number of conflicts, a lot of them in African nations and Asian nations like Myanmar and Cameroon. And I actually have friends and next door neighbors that just moved that used to live in Eritrea, and my dad used to teach in
Oh, okay.
Eritrea in one of those exchange
Wow.
programs. And we know that Eritrea and Ethiopia had
Oh,
conflicts in the past as well, and Sudan. So I just wanted your take on how we can get more of these wars settled and how we can maybe have a peaceful environment. I'm a big fan, and just to let you know, of the song Imagine. And some people think that that is a very utopian view and that we will never have that view. But I think that it might well go for it, even if we can never achieve it. But I just wanted your take on this notion of world peace and all these conflicts that are currently going on. And that's just the 15 or so
yeah.
that Scott mentioned, and there may even be more that he didn't even address.
I appreciate the question. Our foundation is called Care for Peace Foundation, and it has many meanings. First of all, the idea of the relationship between care and peace occurred when I was a hospital corpsman in the United States Coast Guard because I had this incredible feeling when I was taking care of all these guys who really needed care. I had this feeling and I just ended up calling it peace. And it's just that's what it was. And then that went with me after the Coast Guard. I worked with many nurses all over the world, literally all over the world. And I realized that that wasn't my idea. All nurses all over the world, all mothers, all people who spend their life caring in one way or the other, teachers, you name it, plumbers. I mean, people who care, they know what that feeling of peace is, and they know what it is when they're sharing that feeling with other people. And it's definitely not the space between wars. It's not what you have after the cannonades are done, after the war is over. And it certainly isn't what you get when you're sitting on top of a mountain with your legs crossed and your eyes closed, with all the people down in the valley are suffering. Peace has to be the result of caring. And so I even wrote a book called To Care for Peace. It is a global mandate to secure the second human evolution in perpetuity. And that's a big mouthful. I apologize for that. But when I was in Myanmar, I realized that this idea of care for peace, it wasn't just what I was thinking about the feeling, but our foundation arrived in Myanmar only 5 months after Aung San Suu Kyi opened up Myanmar for democracy, to be a free market democracy. We ended up finishing our project, and 2 years later, in 2021, the, the, the junta, the military junta, staged a coup and kicked Aung San Suu Kyi out. She's still in house arrest right now. And so we were in Myanmar during this absolute golden time where democracy was blossoming and the free market was just exploding in such a wonderful way. And I cannot tell you how it is to be in a place where the word liberty is real. We think that liberty and freedom are synonymous. They're not. Liberty is what you're working toward if you're not liberated. Liberty is the process. But then once you are liberated or you are allowed to be free, then that's where freedom comes in. So when you ask me about peace and what I think about peace, I've got a very visceral experience with peace because I was there when it was being molded right in front of my eyes, right in front and in my heart, and talking to the people in Myanmar and letting me know that, wow, now we are Americans. There's a concept, because that's what happens to someone who dreams about being free and thinks that that's a place that you go to. America is a place. But all of a sudden you realize that, wait a minute, if they say we are now Americans, they realize the most important thing about being America and being an American is that feeling of freedom and that feeling of peace. And I was there when it was happening.
Sounds like it. So you got to see it firsthand and everything. Another thing that you probably saw firsthand, and I know a lot of people think of the 60s, and that's the time that I was born in, 62 and everything, as being like this era of free love and all along those lines. And definitely some people having different views about what life meant and all in that sense. But you talk about it in the sense of human evolution. And you said that the first human evolution ended in the mid 60s, and that would have been around the time of a lot of disruption, whether that was around civil rights or whether that was around Vietnam or a number of other things. So I was just wondering, what did you mean when you said that the first human evolution ended in the mid 60s, and when did it start? Would be, I guess, be my first question. And why did it end in the mid 60s?
Yeah, good question. Very important question, because the first human evolution started in the beginning. In the beginning, there was the word. Okay. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that there were words. That means that the human animal was just starting, and so it did the survival of the fittest stuff, and then it got they had tribes, and then tribes fought each other and killed, and so we killed for the first definition of peace. So, because I already explained the second definition of peace, which is the one we're in now, and that is care for peace. Care. You have to have active caring for peace. But in the very beginning, 2.5 million years ago, we didn't have that. So little by little, we ended up having nations that fought and killed each other. And it's just all this, the First World War, the Second World War, all the wars that you mentioned that we're still that we're still dealing with right now. And in a lot of ways, we are still dragging our feet in the first human evolution, because the end of the first human evolution is a period that I defined as being the time when humans conquered nature. We became the animal that was in charge of everything, the keystone animal, if you want to call it that. We had conquered nature, we had circumnavigated the globe, and then most importantly, we had the mutually assured destruction where we could kill everything off. And then the things that you mentioned, that was also when we had existentialism exploded from France, and we got that, and we started looking at what is existentialism. And it wasn't just Sartre and the books and Ionesco and some of the plays and everything. It was all of a sudden, wow, we were facing existence in a way that was different than it had been for 2.5 million years. And most important, it was the time when the peace movement started. It was when people said, okay, why are we here? Well, we've asked that question before. Humanity has been asking that question for a long time, but now it's an existential question. And so that's really the end of the first human evolution. But it's also the beginning of what I call the suspended human evolution. This is the time where, yeah, we're still dragging our feet in the first human evolution. We're looking at ourselves and what's still in us from our animal nature and what's still in us from the first human evolution. But it's also the time when we need to plan the second human evolution, because we're not anywhere near the second human evolution yet, but we can talk about it. And we can look at what people are talking about right now in terms of the Holocene, which is a geological concept, okay? And the Anthropocene is a human effect on geology concept. But when I'm talking about the 3 stages of human evolution, I'm talking about us, you, me, and all the humans here. No animals allowed. I'm not talking about the bushes and the trees. I'm not talking about the shamans and the priests and any of that. I'm talking about humanity, because the second human evolution is something that we have to define it, and then we got to go for it. And in my opinion, we can bring along our God and our gods. We can bring along everything that we have learned till now. And we need to bring all the high level educators, the politicians who have a good spirit and a good heart, because this is going to take everybody in the world. Frankly, it's going to have to be both grassroots and what I call brass roots. We got to have the top have to be there, the brass, the top brass we talk about, but grassroots and brass roots we're gonna have to come together. And I think we're doing it. And you know why I think we're doing it? Because you are doing it. You, Mark Lee, are doing it, because this is what it takes. It takes the leaders of the grass movement, which is you. This whole podcast thing is beautiful because you're able to, you have a breadth of audience, and your dinner party thing that you do with multiple people, which, by the way, I get involved in those, but the thing is, I need to have an educational process first, and that's what you and I are doing right now. We've got to understand where we are now. before we start talking with other people about where we are now, because they've got to have the same words and terminology in the discussion, or it's not going to work. It's just like when I come into a discussion and someone says, "Oh, you must be talking about the Holocene. Let's talk about the Holocene." I say, "Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute." We've got to understand that we're talking about the second human evolution. So we have to know what the first human evolution was and why we're in this suspended state right now that's kind of flopping around like a fish on the deck, where we realize that we shouldn't be having wars, that we shouldn't have so many children, that we need to not uh, pollute, and we need to look at global warming and all the things that are happening right now. This is this suspended human evolution. We got to look at where we are. It's like all of a sudden the road ends and your car is out of gas. You better get out of the car and look ahead, look around, and start thinking about what you got to do. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but you do bring up an interesting point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this. And I'm not saying that it is a wrong point or a right point, but as I was reading a little bit about your notion of the evolutions and the second human evolution, one of the things you talk about is this notion of designing one global nation, indivisible, with liberty for all. And a lot of people will hear that and wonder about kind of like that one world government that sometimes people get fearful of. And I know that that's been a topic of a number of
Yeah.
kind of like conversations around both the utopias and dystopias as well and everything.
Yeah.
So what is your thoughts around that? Because a lot of times we are very, as you mentioned earlier, tribal people, and we oftentimes are proud of our individual races, our individual genders, our individual orientations and stuff like that. But it sounds like part of what you're pushing for is for us to understand that we all live on this society together, whether we are of a different race or a different gender or a different orientation. But I do know that sometimes when you put it in that terms, people get afraid because they hear about those one world governments that are ruling. They hear about the rumors of the Illuminati, and they hear things along those lines that scare them and everything along those lines. So how do you make those conversations balance each other?
Well, first you said scare, and fear is the first reaction of a person when something new or unusual approaches. And so I respect that fear, and I respect that built-in need to wait a minute. I got all this stuff in my head. Now you're putting something else in. My brain is not going to take lightly to this. So what I think that what we have to do is respect those fears. You have to, and then it's what you do with those fears that is the most important. I mean, we have a whole bunch of stuff in our sensorium here, our brains, and so when new information comes in, what do you do with the new information? That's the big question. What are you going to do with this new information? Okay, you know that the world is round. Is that new information? No, but you've heard about global warming. Is that new information? Well, before Al Gore got up there were half the people he was talking about thought he was crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, so thinking somebody's crazy, that's part of the reaction, unfortunately. That's just, and so we have to allow people the time to realize, to understand. And so it takes a lot of talk. It's what I'm saying. It's what you're doing. It's going to take a lot of discussion with people to get to the point where they say, well, okay, I guess that's something that we better consider. Yeah.
Now that makes a lot of sense. I want to take it from a macro element to a micro element, but it ties in what you were very good at. And I think that the conversations are somewhat related, and you might see where I'm going with this and all on those lines. Because we talk about society and the way that society views organizations and all along those lines. And one of the conversations that has been taking place in hospital administration, because like I said, I do have friends that are in the medical field and everything, and also in even the penal society, is this notion of us moving toward this for-profit model and all along those lines. And I know that you've probably seen that, whether it's when your hospitals in Africa or your hospitals in here in the U.S. But sometimes people get afraid, like they get afraid of the bigger picture, because they're going like, I don't necessarily want my hospital to be a for-profit hospital where it's all about the bottom dollar and the making the money. I wanted it to be a hospital where it's about the service and them doing quality service, because they remember the notion. Not saying it was always the case, but the notion of what a good old country doctor looked like and everything, and this whole notion of I think it's the Hippocratic Oath and all along those lines, where you're supposed to be caring for the person, not necessarily worrying about the reward of caring for the person, and all along those lines. So I just wondered how the two conversations might be somewhat related, because I do know that that's one of the concerns people have when they think about big government and big control, is like they think about these private companies that are taking over some of our institutions, including hospitals.
Well, that's very much like your original question, which I really didn't answer, which, it's this under God, indivisible, one global nation. That's, but then if you look at the situation with healthcare, where we're afraid of the privatization, but the reason why we have government is to regulate. Government is there to regulate. It's not lawsuits. It's like telling the hospitals that if you have an intensive care unit, that you have to have one nurse for two patients. You can't have one nurse taking care of more than two patients. And so part of the regulation includes accountability. They have to write a piece of paper or on a computer. Yes, during this shift, this number of people were patients and this number of nurses took care of the patients. So you can't look at the privatization without also looking at the responsibility of government. And that's the same thing with the global nation. Going back to your first question that I didn't answer because it's such a big question, and but I do want to give you a little hint on where I'm at with that. Little by little, our governments, most of the governments in the world, are becoming more humane. But we're getting. Yes, I know there's a lot of dictators in the world right now, and we're afraid of the autocratic nature of our government right now. But the bottom line is we're moving away from that little by little. But we're not moving away as fast as we would like. And I say we would like because we've got this United States Constitution that's only been around for 250 years next year. I mean, we are a very young concept. The idea of democracy is a young concept. The idea that Jefferson said, well, if you're going to have one man, one vote, you better make sure that you have one educated person who is in charge of the vote. And so, we're still working on this experiment. So I'm not doing anything other than following the progression that I think humanity is already on and has been on, because we get mad at Netanyahu for killing, and there's a lot of people who want to take him to the International Criminal Court. I mean, it's and based on what we believe, thou shalt not kill, he should be. But look what Trump's doing. And by the way, I don't get involved in politics because I've worked with USAID. I try to keep focused on my job and what I'm doing. But Trump is not for wars. He's against wars. That is a big, huge leap. And I know he's doing other stuff that, mind-bogglingly ridiculous of what he says. I can't believe it. But that part has got to indicate to the people of the world that, okay, we're moving step by step. We're getting there, because the global nation I'm talking about is there that we're going to. And you're the guy who is part of this whole moving the grass movement, the grassroots movement. Somebody's got to be blowing the weeds, blowing the grass, and that's you. You know what you're doing. And listen, yeah, I'm more interested in talking with the grass movement right now. I'm talking to some of the brass movement. I mean, they're the doctors and the politicians that I meet every now and then. Not, but mostly I'm focusing on the grassroots because I really think that what you can do is to help get this movement along. But you got to be using the words. You've got to be looking at the three stages of human evolution and be able to articulate that and in your own way and get other people to articulate it in their own way too. It's don't take my words. You can, it's got to be put into your own words.
And
And
that makes sense. But in that same realm and everything, how important, because you kind of alluded to it earlier, are the institutions? Because I know one of the complaints that people have is that the institutions are too involved in what we have going on. But there are institutions, including some religious institutions. I consider myself more spiritual than religious and everything, but definitely do believe that there is
yeah,
a power and definitely have a connection to nature. But I do know that there are religions. I think of the Baha'i, and I even think of the Unitarians as well, and some others that definitely seem to have a more evolutionary base in their philosophies, for lack of a better term, based on the way you're describing evolution and all along those lines. But how important is it for us to get the institutions involved, or is this more of a people-centric thing, and the institutions will follow if they choose to?
uh, excellent question. And it's because in my first book, I have 4 templates, and the templates are the personal template, and that's what I bring to the table without anybody else sitting at the table. That's with myself. It's my prime directive with myself, with other people, and with the environment. Then the second one is my relational template. The third one is the balancing of the spiritual and the physical aspects of the second human evolution that we need to go for. But the fourth one answers your question. It's the institutional, because we have to have institutions that have the values that come from the first template, the person, our relational, second template, the third, to be able to balance the spiritual and the physical aspects of what we're doing. And then if these institutions come from somewhere and not just pop out of nowhere, or don't have a value system, or they have their own values based on what they think they are for the media so that they can tell someone what their values are. These corporations who say, yeah, we're for environment, but then they don't do anything about it. I mean, it's got to start from right here. It's like what we talked about before. Where did care for peace start? It starts right here inside of the individual. Now, one of the difficulties that we're going to have when we're in these discussions is really understanding the importance of balancing the physical and the spiritual. And I'll give you an example of where the experiment of humanity went wrong. It's Karl Marx, who says to everyone according to their deed, from everyone according to their ability. That's great. And get rid of the churches. Those things are threatening to the institution of government. Okay? No, no. People need spiritual. People have to have spiritual. It's part of our nature. The Bible, John 1:1, said, "In the beginning there is the Word." I mentioned this before, and then I said also that, but it took millions of years, 2 million and maybe 400,000 years after that, before the shamans came along, and little by little, spirituality became something we kind of tacked into. And then there were words, and you can blame the Phoenicians for that because they're the ones who wrote an alphabet that would give words to thoughts and thoughts to feelings and sensations. Okay. So how how do we get that spiritual as part of what we're doing? Well, in the beginning, there was the Word.
Right.
Well, okay, let's think about that. What is God?
Mm.
God is the essence
Of the word.
of the human spirit.
Oh yeah.
Think about that. Think about that. Because that's the Word. It's the essence. The essence was there because it took humanity so long to see it, to
Mm.
recognize it, to know that it's there. And when you said, you're spiritual, but there are other religions, I don't go to a religion. I go to the word spiritual. Hey, I am spiritual. I'm physical. I'm intellectual. I'm all of that stuff. But the spiritual aspect is one of the most important things because when someone asks me if I believe in God, I say, my, you got to be kidding. God believes in me. I know God because God is the essence of the human spirit. And what is the human spirit? That's the most important question. What is that spirit? And if you're up on the pulpit and you're talking to your flock, ask them what their spirit is. Find
Mm.
out what it is. You know what? I've done this. I've asked people, I say, well, okay, you agree with that idea of the essence, huh? The essence. If God is the essence of the spirit of the human spirit, then what is the human spirit? Oh, it's being
But
good. It's being positive. It's helping people. And I say it's caring for
well,
peace.
Karen, no, Karen sounds good and everything, but there are things that you said that I got to not push back on, but ask about. I remember ago. My was watching TV at a house that he still lives in, but me and my brother were living together, so he called us over because we were one street over and everything because he wanted us to watch this special. I want to say it was famous. It might have been Peter Jennings, or it might have been Ted Koppel, but they were looking at the world religions, both the Eastern and the Western religions. And one of the things they found was that a number of these religions, most of the religions, as a matter of fact, I would say all of the religions, actually had what you just said, which is a commonality, which is respect Mother Nature, respect your elders,
Yeah.
definitely respect definitely don't things that belong to them, and a number of other things that are in the Bible. They're also in the Quran. They're also in the Torah, and even some of the Eastern religions as well, and everything like that. So there seems to be more commonality than a lack of commonality. Oh no, certain religions that kind of go counter to that. Because how many times have you heard, Jeff, this notion that it's my way or the highway? And I don't care whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist. A lot of times people will tell you that you got to follow their path if you want to make it to the next dimension, whatever that next dimension might be. And all along those lines,
Hey,
basically.
Mark, you're cutting out.
Oh, did I cut
Yeah.
out?
Well, yeah, it's very choppy.
Okay. Well,
Very
hopefully you can
choppy.
hear me
So,
now. But the gist of what I
yeah.
was asking is, what do you say to those that are having that my way or the highway attitude that are religious?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, what would you say?
It's hard. Well, I try to point out the commonalities between the religion. And I do think that the extremes oftentimes are where we spend our time focusing on. We spend the time looking at the extremes that are in the Islamic religion. We spend time looking at the extremes that are in the Christian religion. So I think that we as humans sometimes spend too much time looking at the extremes. But I don't know your thoughts around that. And you mentioned the human spirit, but do we
Uh,
spend too much time on the extremes?
well, yeah, and I think that the my way or the highway is was it Byrne who wrote the book with parent adult child? It's very um autocratic for
Mhm.
someone to say my way or the highway. And so that means you're dealing with someone who has that in their spirit. Um, you're not really dealing with the issue. because if you put the issue out, then it's always up for discussion. That's
Right.
why opinions should not come into any discussion. Remember, I'm a planner. So one of the things that I have a high sensitivity and the sensibility of is of avoiding opinions. Me too. My opinions, because I've got opinions. It's what happens after you've experienced something so many different times that you got an opinion. But you come up with the my way or the highway, which a lot of the Trumpers were that I talked with were very my way or the
Mm.
highway people. And it wasn't, once you disarmed the the fear that they have of, oh, you're going to fight me or you'll be on my side, which is the same as my way or the highway. You're either going to
Mm.
agree with me or you're not. you know Once you get past that, once you get past their fear, then you can bring the issue up, and you can say, well, here's an issue. What do you think about this? And for me, asking a question is 10 million times better than an assumption.
Right.
It's like, it's like a pound of cure is worth no, what is it? Pound of problem or something. I don't know, something. But no, just ask questions. Say, well, what do you think about this? Well, what happens if this happens? You know, okay, if I ran into Elon Musk, I'd say, okay, so if you had 12 kids and you're still impregnating women and having more kids, what um, do you ever ask yourself, is this something that everybody in the world should do, or is this something that you think you can do because you've got a lot of money and you can afford it? I mean, what? So I want to get into their head. I want to know what it is that makes them tick, and what.
Mm.
But that's it. It's not to convince them of anything. It's for me to understand what it is that is in the mind of a my way or the highway attitude.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned earlier this whole notion of the human spirit, and I know a lot of times, and I mentioned earlier the athletics that are going on in the world, and when people think of human spirit, they think of athletes and their way of conquering things when they are facing difficult times, whatever that is, if they're down by 20 points or if they're up by 20 points or whatever, but they are uh, resilient. That's what I was looking for, and everything like that. So, what in your mind is the core of the human spirit? Because I know a lot of times when we hear people talking about the human spirit, it's oftentimes in the context of either overcoming boundaries, like we oftentimes hear the person that is threatened and is able to pick up a semi truck or a big truck because they have been threatened by something that is going to possibly take their lives, so they have to be resilient. And of course, we oftentimes hear it in sports where people are facing not unsurmountable odds, because there's nothing really unsurmountable in a sports, even though being down 3-0 might be unsurmountable, but that's just me making a joke on the Hurricanes and everything like that. But what is your definition of what the human spirit is?
Oh, I think the human spirit, I'm talking off the top of my head now. But when we talk about human evolution, every single baby that's born has to start their own evolution process.
Right.
And so the grown-ups around, and eventually the peers that are around, and eventually the teachers and educational books and what they see on even television, parts that gets that process moving even more,
Hmm.
so that at some point in your life, in a child's life, they realize that there's something else there. And I think that the basis of the human spirit is the realization that there's something else there.
Hmm.
That's it.
That means,
And
that means,
and that's wherein the gods lie. That's where the religions reach in and grab and take something as theirs, um, because once you realize that there's something more there, and you're only 9 or 10 years old, because I hear that about 10 years old is when children are able to conceptualize. Well, conceptualization is the ability to take your process of wondering about what might be there to the next step, whatever that next step is. And that's how we evolve. Spiritual is part of the evolution process. Now, one of the problems is when religion, formal religion, industrial or institutionalized religions come in and try to grab that process from the individual. And there are many different ways that process, that grabbing process occurs. I think about Jehovah's Witnesses or the Church of the Latter Day Saints, where they send their boys around for 2 years to knock on doors and to, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful idea. I mean, meet your neighbors, talk
Right.
with people, have them slam the door in your face. The ones who don't slam the doors, you get to talk to them. You have that nervousness of going up to a door and wondering if it's going to have a shotgun on the other side or somebody not even answering. So, all these processes that are part of that individual evolution process that you asked me about, where does that spiritual begin? Where is it? What is the core of the spirit? And I think it's the ability to wonder. It is the ability to realize that there's something else there. And of course, little kids, they're afraid of the monster under their bed. that's that's part of it. That's part. Uh,
That is part of it. They're afraid of the monster in the bed. I was actually laughing at one point because you mentioned the sales job, and I think when I was at Marquette, which is the university I went to, I want to say that I sold both the Encyclopedia Britannicas for a hot minute, and I want to say that I had a brief job selling Kirby's, if I remember correctly. And yeah, you're right. A lot of times you're sitting there going like, I wonder if these people are even going to halfway listen to me, because I think I only had those jobs for like maybe a week or two, if that. And like I said, there's been written all
you
along those lines.
frozen.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you were frozen there for
Okay.
about 15 seconds.
Okay. I was just saying, I remember that whole notion of being the sales job, because I had one of those when I was at Marquette and everything along those lines, which is the university I went to. I think I was doing both the Encyclopedia Britannica and the Kirby vacuum cleaner, but I only had.
Yeah, I lost you again.
Oh, did you lose me once again? The computer is
Yep,
acting kind of crazy.
yep,
Let's see if I
yep.
can.
Your picture freezes and your words are gone.
The words are gone and the picture is freezing. So, I'm going to little commercials.
There you go. I can't hear anything.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So talk, they hear you. You can do it if you try.
It is a gem, tucked away near a forest, a place where the lost are found. It is a gift of wholeness for those who are ready to receive it. A secret place where peace can be found in stillness. Where you can finally stop fighting to survive and just breathe. Just breathe. Where accountability corrects and the word help is not a cuss word. It is the place that was thought of before you ever thought you needed it. It is where forgiveness starts and healing begins. Where we are taught that when we put our hands to work, we can create something. As we uprooted the weeds in the garden, it was a reflection of our lives. As we uprooted disappointment, as we uprooted pain, as we uprooted being traumatized. Because God doesn't deal with the surface. He gets to the root of it. We laughed. We shared tears. We shared our stories. We shared our fears, our dreams, our visions, our heart. We were more than just mothers. We were broken women trying to figure out how to become whole again. It became a place where homelessness became hopeless until we reached the bridge of wholeness.